my revolution just bury our minds instead of freeing them? Encrypting Evil Corp's data was meant to empower us. Instead, it left us powerless, scaring us into even more submission. 5-9 didn't get rid of the invisible hand. Turned it into a fist that punched us in the dick. And like a botnet, the fear I created is spreading so fast it's practically airborne. It swallowed us whole, digested us, and now we're stuck in its asshole waiting to be dumped out. And while we're here, they're having their way with us. They packaged our fight into product. Turned our dissent into intellectual property. Televising our revolution with commercial breaks. They backdoored into our minds and robbed our truth, refurbished the facts, then marked up the price. This is what they do. This is what they're good at. This is their greatest trick. Lobotomizing us into their virtual reality horror show. And this all started because I tried to hide from society. Remember? Fuck society. Yeah, well, I fuck society, all right. I reset it to 0. And if I don't do anything about it, it'll continue to grow in this malignant way. And that's what I'm afraid of the most. This dark future that I set into motion. Who knows what could come from this? What if instead of fighting back, we cave, give away our privacy for security, exchange dignity for safety, trade in revolution for repression? What if we choose weakness over strength? They'll even have us build our own prison. This is what they wanted all along, for us to buy in on our worst selves. And I just made it easier for them. I didn't start a revolution. I just made us docile enough for their slaughtering. And I can stand here and blame Evil Corp and every other conglomerate out there for taking advantage of us. Blame the FBI, NSA, CIA for letting them get away with this. Blame all the world's leaders for aiding and abetting them. Blame Adam Smith for inventing modern-day capitalism in the first fucking place. Blame money for dividing us. Blame us for letting it. But none of that's true. The truth is, I'm the one to blame. I'm the problem.
Whoa, Nelly! How about that clip from Mr. Robot? A Gnostic themed series that has predicted so much about our collapsing society in 2023. So much. As Eric Hoffer said, every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket. And as I say, there are no exceptions, even for anarchist hackers. Anthony DeMello did say that when you fight or run away from something, you give it more power. Philip K. Dick said that to fight the empire is to be infected by its derangement. Fight not monsters, lest you become a monster, Nietzsche stressed.
What was done to me created me. It's a basic principle of the universe that every action will create an equal and opposing reaction.
Is that how you see it? Like an equation?
What was done to me was monstrous.
And they created a monster.
And here we are in this age of Hermes, Philip K. Dick world and Gnostic times. How's the revolution working out for ya? How's that good fight? Guess what? That edgy podcast or cool Twitter poster or banger social-political YouTuber is just part of the archon machinery now. Go listen to Tim Pool, the Young Turks, NPR, or whatever the fuck. It doesn't matter. They're all playing for the same satanic team that feeds off your loosh and strengthens the empire that never ended. Keep thinking your donations, online arguments, or slacktivism is making a difference. It's all just a Punch and Judy show with the puppets exchanging bats to proffer the illusion of a noble battle. Vote Democrat or vote Republican. The world is changing now that my side has the bat. As Michael Malice said, people will say with a straight face that having one choice for dear leader is tyranny, but having two is freedom.
And they haven't given us any other options outside the occasional purely symbolic participatory act of voting. You want the puppet on the right or the puppet on the left?
And hey, it used to be communists and capitalists fighting on the streets. Then it changed to Antifa and Proud Boys. Now it's NRA Christians and trans people, or whatever. And high above, the archons and their catamites in the establishment count their money while the poor count their blessings. The revolution will not be televised because it happens inside of you. Simple as that. As Ursula Le Guin said, you cannot buy the revolution. You cannot make the revolution. You can only be the revolution. It is in your spirit or it is nowhere.
Paint the sky with rainbows. But here's the thing. The sheeple aren't going anywhere. They like my world. They don't want this sentimentality. They don't want freedom or empowerment. They want to be controlled. They crave the comfort of certainty.
It's a movement and a meditation, as the Gospel of Thomas says, an inner alchemical transformation that disengages you from the Ouroboros and activates your indwelling trickster. Then you're no longer playing the game of Saturn and can see the whole of the moon. This is the way, Mandalorian, and there is no other way.
Neo, sooner or later you're going to realize, just as I did, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path.
Or don't listen to me. Turn off Aeon Bide and continue to witness millions of psyches crack in despair, the middle class vanish, and nature being raped. Continue watching Ukrainian, Russian, and Muslim boys being pulverized by the military-industrial complex. As Beck sang, things are going to change. I just know it. I'm a loser, baby.
I wish that I could bake a cake made out of rainbows and smiles and we'd all eat it, be happy.
She doesn't even go here.
Do you even go to this school?
No, I just have a lot of feelings.
Or instead, take the greatest and most heroic journey of your life and go within for the supremacy of self-knowledge, finding out that you have an original purpose and a grand destiny. That's what we do here at Aeon Bite, and welcome to the desert of the real. I am Miguel Connor, always your Pompatus of Gnosis.
A high-powered mutant of some kind never even considered for mass production. Too weird to live, and too rare to die.
We continue going inward. Part of this is deprogramming our egos, which always includes understanding, as Alan Moore said, that all history is fiction. We must learn history and then peel back its skin of propaganda for a more authentic history.
Whoa.
One of the most critical annals is the secret history of the Gnostics and how it was repressed. This repression has fed part of the collapse of humanity underway now, as it rejects logos and wisdom, gnosis and theurgy.
Censorship is American as apple pie, so shut up.
Someone unmatched in seeing beyond conventional history is John Michael Greer. He honors the virtual Alexandria to discuss his latest book, The Ceremony of the Grail, Ancient Mysteries, Gnostic Heresies, and the Lost Rituals of Freemasonry. By Odin's Dingleberries, get ready to see the secret history of the Gnostics in a way that awakens your divine spark like never before. Heck and heckety, John even provides the secret rituals once used by the ancient mystics that can heal the land and heal our collective consciousness. As a bonus for all subs, beyond the full show, I'll include a venerable interview with Mark Amaru Pinkham. He discussed similar themes like the Knights Templar, the Holy Grail, and orthodoxy's hiding of ancient mysteries. Don't miss it.
All I've ever known to be true is a lie.
Hey, Miguel. How do we know you haven't been compromised like 99% of podcasters, YouTubers, television pundits, and influencers? Well, you don't, Montresor. But I would say because the algorithms have censored me for years, I worry about paying bills at the end of the month like most middle-class peeps, and somehow I embrace the most threatening ideology to the establishment in history. It probably means I'm on the outside looking in.
You are a smelly pirate hooker.
If you don't believe me, go back to Hassan Piker, Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, Vosh, or any of those smooth operators at Fox, CNN, MSNBC, who enjoy living off your souls and paychecks.
The illusion of freedom will continue as long as it's profitable to continue the illusion. At the point where the illusion becomes too expensive to maintain, they will just take down the scenery. They will move the chairs and tables out of the way. And you will see the brick wall at the back of the theater.
Did you know that the Nazis didn't invent eugenics, but imported the idea from the USA? Did you know that Hitler modeled his concentration camps off the British and Soviets? Did you know that Hitler was trying to copy the American government's racist style and public relations? Der Fuhrer was amused that America could enslave blacks, genocide Native Americans, brutally marginalize the Slavs, Irish, and Italians, exploit Chinese and Hispanic workers, and get away with it. The world never noticed. What's more, America could put on this happy face about being the land of the free and equality for everyone.
Are we the baddies?
Hitler thought this was one of the most excellent marketing campaigns ever, and he could mimic it in Germany to create his racially pure country. And did you know that after World War II, the Allies set up internment camps in Germany that killed hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians?
No way!
But it's the price to pay to fight fascism. Say you who are Shapiro, Vosh, or Piker fans. Gee, then why didn't the Allies get rid of fascist dictators Stalin, Franco, or Salah Sadish? The last one ruled my home country of Portugal for decades after the war. What happened there? Why did my people and so many others across Europe, tens of millions, suffer and die unfairly? Oh yeah, America had to continue that marketing campaign of the land of the free while importing Nazis to a country where blacks still had to use separate water fountains. And Asians had to be bombed to kingdom come on distant shores.
God damn, I love working on American soil, Dan. Ain't had this much fun since Woodward and Bernstein.
What happened to the American dream?
What happened to the American dream? It came true. You're looking at it.
The true history. It's a red pill suppository up our rectums of reality, I tell ya. But the truth will set us free. And now an even bigger truth with our interview with the wonderful John Michael Greer.
Perhaps we should start with how you're feeling?
Not good.
What's not good right now?
Everything.
Humor me with some specifics.
How do we know if we're in control? No, we're not just making the best of what comes at us and that's it. They're trying to constantly pick between two options. Like your two paintings in the waiting room. Or Coke and Pepsi. McDonald's or Burger King. Hyundai or Honda. It's all part of the same blur, right? Just out of focus enough. It's the illusion of choice. Half of us can't even pick our cable, the gas, electric, the water we drink, our health insurance. Even if we did, would it matter? Now, if our only option is Blue Cross or Blue Shield, what the f*** is the difference? In fact, aren't they the same? No, man. Our choices are prepaid for us. Long time ago.
I'm sorry you feel you have no control.
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us we have the pleasure of being joined, as always, by John Michael Greer, this time to discuss his latest book, The Ceremony of the Grail, Ancient Mysteries, Gnostic Heresies, and the Lost Rituals of Freemasonry. John, thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you again for having me on again, yeah.
And that tagline, I mean, you hit all the occult sweet spots right there. I mean, you can retire now, or your copywriter.
No. I've got plenty of fun stuff in process.
You always do. Always enjoy your books. And as I was talking, the audience will love this because it's got all the right notes. So tell us, why did you decide to write this book? I think you talk about how this came out a little bit before this idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay, basically, this book was kind of spun off from my earlier title, The Secret of the Temple. I was at that time doing a lot of research into temples, into these very interesting pieces of folklore and tradition that connected temples of certain kinds to agricultural fertility, and ended up writing this book suggesting that there is an archaic folk technology that uses various natural energies to improve agricultural yields. Very important in earlier societies, and frankly not that unimportant now. But in the process, I ended up doing a lot of study of the Grail legend, because that ties into the temple technology in certain ways. And that ended up spinning off and taking on a life of its own. And I did further reading. You know how you go down the rabbit hole and more stuff just comes out and comes out. And eventually I was looking at this going, okay, there's more than enough for a book here. And so I started writing. That's often the way my nonfiction projects come into being. I don't necessarily plan them in advance. I discover some kind of interesting question, some kind of odd little detail, and I go, if I start following these tracks, where will they lead? And it's usually someplace interesting, at least to me.
Rabbit hole. Down the rabbit hole you go.
Down the rabbit hole. Oh yeah.
Well, where do you think we should start? Because I love your book because it's not really linear. We go back and forward in time. We deal with this author. We deal with this symbolism. I mean, for the audience, we go back to the Bronze Age, and then we'll jump back to medieval times. So where should we start?
Probably the best place to start is with the Grail legends themselves. Everybody's heard about the Holy Grail. Most people have a really incomplete and often an inaccurate idea of what the original Grail legends were about. They're not Christian. They're very emphatically not Christian. That was added in later. And so there's we have these strange legends that surface in the Middle Ages, in the 12th century. The Crusades are underway. Knighthood is in flower. Lots of people going around Europe slaughtering each other in small groups. And you have the first wave of stories about this obscure king back someplace in the past who everyone knows as Arthur. And the Arthurian legend was just in the process of being born. And out of the blue, you have starting to pop up in various corners of Europe stories about something called the Grail. What is the Grail? That's actually one of the questions that has to be asked, depending on which version of the Grail story you're reading. The Grail seeker always has to ask the right question, and then everything happens, and the denouement is reached, and so on. But so, what is the Grail? The word Grail actually it originally seems to have been a word for a serving dish. Gradal, grazal in various medieval French dialects. The kind of dish you would serve, for example, a large fish on or something like that. Mm-hmm. And exactly why that is the case is a really fascinating question. But that was there was the Grail. It didn't become the Holy Grail until later, but there is the Grail, and it shows up for the first of the surviving Grail stories. Probably not the first of the lot, the first that was ever written, but the first surviving one is incomplete. It's by Chrétien de Troyes, and he said that he got the story from a book which he was lent by one of his noble patrons. And it's all about this clueless young man named Percival. And Percival is raised by his widowed mother off in the woods, has no contact with knighthood, decides to leave home and seek adventure, goes blundering around, ends up at the court of King Arthur, and eventually ends up going out on the usual sort of knightly quest thing. And after various days, he comes to this mysterious castle. And he goes into the castle, and everyone treats him hospitably, and he's, they help him out of his armor and give him a bath, which after a long day riding a horse in full armor you need. And so he comes to the dining hall, and there he sits next to this king, the Fisher King, who he had previously seen fishing in the river. But there's the Fisher King, and all of a sudden everything goes dead silent. And in that silence, this procession moves through. There's somebody carrying a spear from which blood runs in a rivulet down from the point. People are bringing, the other people in the procession have candles in candlesticks. And then finally comes a woman carrying the Grail. Chrétien does not tell us what the Grail is. It's just she's bringing the Grail. This walks past in total silence. Now, Percival the whole time is going, what is going on here? But he had been told by his mother that he should not ask rude questions, so he keeps his mouth shut. Okay. So the feast is served. He has his dinner. He goes to bed for the night. He wakes up the next morning, and the castle is empty, completely deserted. The only living things in it are himself and his horse. So he goes down, he saddles his horse. He rides out. As soon as he's out, the drawbridge goes wham behind him. And that's that. And he goes riding off, and a little while later he meets the ugliest woman in the world, who shows up fairly frequently in Grail legend. And the ugliest woman in the world tells him that he is a complete, clueless numbskull. Because if he had only asked what the Grail was and who did it serve and things like this, then the evil enchantment that was on the land would be lifted, and all kinds of marvelous things would happen. And so he goes riding out to try to find his way back to the Grail castle, but fat chance. So now that's where the story ends. We don't know anything else from Chrétien. Of course, an incomplete story like that, even now, if somebody, if Stephen King were to launch into a series and fall over dead, you know as well as I do, there'd be 13 different people lining up to write the other volumes in the series.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, in those days, they didn't have copyright yet. So what happened is everyone just jumped on it. And so there were like 3 different writers who wrote these continuations, all of which eventually involve Percival finding his way back to the castle and asking the question, ta-da, everything's fine. But, so that's the basic Grail story. Now, later on, you get this Christian overlay. You get the insistence that it was originally the dish that Jesus ate out of in the Last Supper. Later, it becomes the cup that he drank from, the very one that he says, "This is my blood," and so on. And it all gets wrapped up in Orthodox Christian theology and a lot of stuff about virginity. One must have virginity. Monks at that time were kind of obsessive about that.
Oh, yeah.
But the further back you go, the further away you get from Christian orthodoxy, and the more you're in the presence of something very, very strange.
Indeed, yeah. Even you mentioned a woman carrying an artifact. It's not something that Catholicism would allow, so this goes back to the paganism.
Oh, either to the pagans or to the Gnostics.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the major things we know about all of the organized Gnostic sects is that they gave much more respect to women and much more important places in their religious life to women than any of the Orthodox, than the Catholic or the Orthodox, or in fact, until quite recently, any other mainstream Christian church was willing to do. The Cathars had women on the same level as men in terms of becoming members of the priesthood, becoming perfecti, all this kind of stuff. So, and one of the things that makes this interesting, of course, is that the time and the place when these legends got started, when we first encountered the Grail legends, is the same time and place that the Cathar Church was getting going in southern France.
Yeah, and as you write, after the Cathars were exterminated, the Grail stories just sort of vanished from Europe.
Exactly. That's one of the many weird things about the Grail. The Grail shows up. There's Chrétien de Troyes with his version of it. There's Wolfram von Eschenbach giving a German version, which is even weirder in some ways, but it's the same basic story. But it has a lot of strange things in it. You have dozens of other people piling on, churning out Grail legends, and then the Cathar Crusade happens. The Cathars are slaughtered en masse, and it stops. Dead silence about the Grail until centuries later, the Arthurian legends come back into vogue. This is the era of Sir Thomas Malory, people like that. We're in the 15th century here, and of course, because they're digging through old books and say, "Oh, here's an interesting story." And so Malory, of course, he took the later Christianized version, and that's where we get Galahad. God help us. Galahad. The thing is, I have to say, Christian mystics adore Galahad. I know some Christian mystics, they love them Galahad. Everyone else finds him just an unbearable prig. I am virtuous and therefore I have the strength of 1,000. I mean, he's just a plaster saint in armor. He's boring.
Well, he made that America song, "The Tropic of Sir Galahad." Huh?
Well, that's right. Yeah. Good heavens! Yeah. I mean, America wrote some pretty incomprehensible songs, but that one, cause never was the reason for the evening of the Tropic of Sir Galahad. What the ringtail rambling are they trying to say there?
Maybe they're secret Cathars.
Or something like that, or maybe they're just using a lot of weed.
Probably the latter, yeah.
Probably but yeah, maybe it's a secret Cathar symbolism. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because, for example, you've got the Cathar, or we should probably tell the audience too, when dealing with these ancient stories and Grail stories. Mm-hmm. There's different levels, right, John? Mm-hmm. You can't just take it at face value. You've got to get yourself in a different mindset.
Oh yeah, yeah. One of the things that we've lost in modern times is the sense that the important stories, the stories that matter, mean more than one thing, and they mean it on more than one level. Back in the Middle Ages, everybody knew that. Everyone knew that any story out of the Bible, for example, had at least 4 meanings. It had the literal meaning. It had a moral meaning. It had a religious meaning. It had a mystical meaning. Each of these are independent. The Muslims actually take it even further. They insist that every verse in the Quran has 7 meanings. You got to ask them to explain it. It's beyond me. But the Grail legends, especially, there's just layer after layer of complexity woven into them, and especially the older ones. You get into the later Christianized ones, and the secret meaning is always ordinary Christian theology. Which is fine. If you're a mainstream Christian, that's it's great. You can read some, so you're the Adventures of Sir Galahad, and that will, strengthen your Christian faith, and that's great. But those of us who are not mainstream Christians might be interested a little more in some of the older stuff because there's a lot of meat there.
Indeed, there is. So what are some of the commonalities that we have in these Grail stories before we start getting into the secrets behind them? And for example, there's also some thought the Grail was a stone that came from Earth, from Lucifer losing a battle or something like that.
Yeah. That's that. I mentioned Wolfram von Eschenbach, his version, Percival. The Grail is an emerald. Right. It is not a cup. It is not a dish. It is an emerald. It is an emerald that he gives a name, lapsit exilas, which is a lot of people did this in those days. It's a complex Latin pun. Lapsit is he or she or it fell. Okay, ex illas, Latin, from among them, and it's illas meaning from among them. It really puts that emphasis on it. Who was it? Think of your Gnosticism. Who was it that fell from among them? It's Sophia.
Right.
It's the Eon Sophia who fell out of the realm of the Eons, descended into this world. So, she's the Grail, and that's one of the things that that Volstrom was communicating in that. And there are various other changes you can ring on that Lapsitic Vilas. It's kind of clever. So sometimes it's a stone. Sometimes, it's an emerald from the crown of Lucifer that was knocked out when he was duking it out with the Archangel Michael and came tumbling down to earth, and here it is. What is the Grail? One of the French legends, I forget which specific one it is, says the Grail has 5 different forms. And, of course, it doesn't tell you what they are. It's just dropping these things. But in terms of common things, what we have in the older legends, in the ones that have had a layer of religious plaster put over them, and Sir Galahad brought in to do his thing, what you have is specifically, there's the Grail, which is a mysterious object carried in a procession by a woman. You have the wasteland. The idea is that the territory around the Grail Castle is desolate. No tree grows, no water flows in the rivers. It's a vision of total ecological catastrophe. You have the Fisher King, who is wounded. The polite version says that he was wounded in the thighs. The impolite version says he was wounded in the genitals. And he is unable to die and unable to be healed until somebody asks the right question. You have that whole theme of the question, which has to be asked. That's really something unique in the world's myths and legends. Usually it's somebody has to give the right answer. But in this case, you have to ask the right question. And then you have, let's see, those are core things. There's the ugliest woman in the world who knows everything. She shows up constantly. And she's great. She is the major source of information for Percival or Parzival, whatever form he takes. But she's always around. She knows everything. She is screamingly ugly, but she's a nice person and she will help you. And so if this launches you on a quest and you find yourself sitting down next to a really ugly woman who starts giving you information, listen closely and be very polite and friendly. She will help you. Just in case this starts any Grail quests, I would not be infinitely surprised if it does. So those are the core elements of the Grail legend as we have it before it started being, as I say, plastered over with theology. Those are the things that seem to have been in the original version whenever that was written, whoever wrote it. And that's kind of our starting place. And from there, that was. It's not quite fair to say that was my starting place, although it was just one step removed from it. My starting place was Jessie Weston, who I talk about in the book. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about her.
Okay, she's
Very
kind
cool
of person.
Character.
You really wonder why it is that there are certain figures, certain women, who were erased from modern intellectual history. You'd think that the feminists would be all over Jessie Weston. Because seriously, she was a pioneer woman scholar in a field that had been completely dominated by men up to her time. She was a scholar of medieval legends. She was the daughter of a tea merchant. She had a little bit of money, so she could support herself. Didn't have to get a university position, but she was one of the first women in Europe to get a doctorate degree in folklore studies. And then started publishing in the field, carried on lively debates with various rivals, never let anybody put her down just because she was female. But there are two problems here. The first problem is that she was into folklore studies. She was studying these old medieval traditions, which are perhaps not fashionable enough these days. And the other problem is where they led her, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, even as you write in your book, it's a curious thing about the 19th century, John. Even I agree with you, Blavatsky still does not get the dues that she deserved.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that woman changed history, but she's still sort of whitewashed from...
Yeah. Yeah, there were one of the things that's really fascinating to look. Blavatsky was one of the most influential of them all, but there was a whole flurry of women who made an immense impact on cultural history at the time. But because they did it by way of occultism, by way of alternative spirituality, they've been removed, they've been edited out of popular memory. And the thing is, they did that because that was one of the few places where women could really make a splash in the world. You know, if Blavatsky had gone into most other professions, you know, everyone would say, oh, well, she's just a woman. But, you know, she shows up and founds a Theosophical Society. And, I mean, there were two women at the core of the Theosophical Society when it was founded in New York in 1875. There was her and there was Emma Harding Britton. And both of them were major cultural figures at the time. And they shook the world. And yet nobody wants to talk about it because they were occultists. Can't have that. We all have to pretend that everyone's been nice and rational, and these horrid occultists. Ooh, back in my misspent childhood, the original movie version of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, where there's the Duchess of Bulgaria who hates children, and nothing sends her to conniption fits more than the thought of children. They're horrid. I get the impression that a lot of people in the sort of chattering classes these days are that way about occultists. If we show up, it's
Oh yeah, no doubt. They don't want that woo stuff, and like you said, there are autobiographies of Gandhi that will not even mention Blavatsky. It's like without Blavatsky, there's no Gandhi.
Yeah, which is crazy. In fact, the Theosophical go to India, and they're very up on that. They talk a lot about the extent to which the Theosophical Society generally helped along the struggle for India's independence. But you get out into Europe or into America, and not a word about that. We can't mention. It's really stupid. It is really stupid.
Yeah, the more things just haven't changed as much as people want to say. So.
Yeah, it's the mythology of progress again. We go around in circles and insist that if we just go around in circles even faster, that's progress.
Lord have mercy. So tell us, what was, again, you write about Jessie Weston. She was very innovative, kind of great ideas, rubbed shoulders with some of the great poets, historians, occultists of the late 19th, 20th century. But what was her innovation when it came to the Grail, or her great discovery?
The crucial thing that she figured out, she read all of the Grail legends. She read them in medieval French, medieval German. She was fluent in all kinds of old languages. And so she was reading these things and comparing them to some of the folklore studies that were coming out in her time, and said, good heavens, what we're seeing here in the Grail legend is an account of an initiation ritual. Okay, you bring the candidate to the ceremony, and you have this procession in front of them. You have some things happen. They have to answer the question right. If they don't, they fail the initiation, and they wake up the next morning in an empty castle. If they answer the question right, the initiation goes through. It has all the features of a ritual. So she proposed that, first in some papers, and then in a book called The Quest of the Holy Grail, and finally in her last book, From Ritual to Romance, arguing that this was an initiation ritual that had the Grail legends were a slightly garbled account of an initiation ritual that had once belonged to the ancient pagan mysteries, and that had later been picked up by one of the Gnostic sects and transmitted by them to Europe. So that was her theory. And the starting point to my investigation was looking at that and going, okay, was she right? We know a lot more about the Gnostics now than they did in her time. We know a lot more about the ancient mysteries than they did in her time. So, we've got the enigmatic literature, among other things. We've got a lot of further material. How does her theory stack up if you just take it seriously? If you just said, okay, here's a hypothesis. How does the evidence sort out? My argument is she was right. And my argument is the argument of my book is that she caught something that almost nobody else did, and that she identified the way in which an archaic mystery initiation, equivalent to the Eleusinian mysteries, was actually passed on into medieval Europe, and as she points out, was actually revived and reenacted in her own time.
In her own time, huh?
In her own time. That was the thing she leaked in From Ritual to Romance, that she was in contact with a group of people who still had the ritual and were performing it. Now, she did not say, and I've taken part in it, but I'm almost certain she did. She gave, in one of the appendices of my book is an essay that she wrote in the form of a story, which she published in an occult magazine at the time, giving her conception of the Grail initiation. And it had never been published since that one appearance in the 19-teens. Nobody had published it again. As far as I could tell, nobody even cited it again. She referenced it in one of her books. I chased it down. The internet is useful. I was able to score a scanned copy of that issue of Quest, of the Quest magazine, and go flipping through that and go, wow. And so, since it's not exactly easy to find these days, I scanned the whole thing and OCR'd it and put it in as an appendix. So anyone who's interested, you've got her text now. And it's very clear from the details and from the way she talks about it, even though she didn't say so in so many words, it's clear that she knew that initiation from having experienced it. And so one of the things that I try to explore in the book is, okay, how did this happen and who was involved?
Yeah, I think the audience should know how stunning this is, because one thing that people have tried to figure out is these amazing ancient mysteries that could transform people, that could you could see into the other world. You could lose your fear of death. It created philosophers and kings. I mean, if you want to talk about something objectively good, you have these mysteries, but they were so secretive. People are like, well, damn Christians, they lost it. But as you say, this was smuggled through the Gnostics, in the Middle Ages, and then given to other secret societies later on.
Yeah, basically,
it survived the destruction of the Cathars, even.
Yeah. There, as far as I can tell, and this is hypothetical, this is tentative. I'm piecing together scraps of data. A particular Gnostic sect called the Naassenes, who were, Gnostics kind of fell along a long spectrum from the sort of hardcore Johannite, the world is evil, we are caught in this black iron prison and we must flee, where's the escape hatch? And then you have all the way to the other side where you have the Naassenes who are saying, okay, this world is where we are.
Right.
This world is where we are incarnated. It is what it is. And yes, it is our destiny ultimately to transcend it, but we have things to do first. And the Naassenes, we have some chunks of a Nassene document, which the silly Christians, one of the Christian heresy hunters, included large chunks of this Nassene document in the process of denouncing it. And so Jesse Weston, with the help of G.R.S. Mead, peeled out the use, what was actually Nassene in this. And okay, so the Nassenes are saying that the Greek classical mysteries, the Eleusinian mysteries, the mysteries of the Great Mother and Attis and so on, that these are actually the first step in the spiritual progression.
Right.
That they treated these Greek mysteries as the first gate. They treated ordinary Christian sacraments as the second gate, and their own spiritual practices as the third gate. So it was this really interesting syncretistic system. And then that proceeded to be spread with Gnostic groups through various corners of Europe. It is by no means impossible, given where the Grail legends showed up, and who had connections to what. It is by no means impossible the Knights Templar had it, and were practicing it. There are some details of this is something I want to expand on in a future book. There's some details that have come out about the charges against the Templars and about some of the things that they were thought to have done or known to have done that suggest that they had something going on. They were perfectly willing to take part in ordinary Christian ritual, but it wasn't the only thing they were doing. And so there again, you have the Nassene, first gate, second gate, third gate structure. But it certainly was around in various parts of France, various parts of Britain, various parts of Scotland. And where in all of those, of course, the Templars had a large presence. And it managed to survive the destruction of the Templar order. It survived the destruction of the Cathars, probably in little, local, isolated groups. And eventually, as a lot of Scottish initiatory traditions found their way south into England again, and there are some elements of certain old Masonic rituals that suggest that some of the people who were familiar with who were familiar with those or who helped write those were familiar with the Grail ritual. And then the trail kind of tapers off for a while, but apparently a written version of that came into the hands of people in Victorian England. And I'm pretty sure, based on material in some of his writings, that William Morris, the guy who invented modern fantasy fiction, the guy who first thought of writing an adventure story involving magic and swordplay in a world that doesn't exist, that he was involved in the rediscovery of it. He certainly put some very, very significant stuff into the biggest of his fantasy novels that seem to have come straight from that. And from him to the Theosophists, to G.R.S. Mead, and the circle around him where it was apparently being practiced when Jesse Weston wrote about it. There were all kinds of direct connections there. So that's kind of the story the story of how this ritual, going through many changes in the process, of course, came down through the years and survived in scraps in enough pieces that I was able to reconstruct it and put a detailed script and instructions for performance in the book.
Yes, for the audience, John has it right there. I've read it, so we might have something as close as these seemingly lost ancient mysteries to really get an encounter with God. And it's interesting too, John, because we have the reconstruction of the Naassenes by Hippolytus, and you can say, well, Hippolytus was a heresy hunter, but Hippolytus he wrote about the Druids, the Hindus. I mean, he is recording things I feel as neutral as possible because he wants this evidence for the church. And he even says that the Nassene ritual is a dead ringer to the Eleusinian mysteries, that they are tapping. They're just borrowing stuff from them.
The really annoying thing about Hippolytus is that he actually, in this book on heresies, his big heresy hunting handbook, he included a text of the Eleusinian mysteries. He included a text of the mysteries of Attis. Those chapters are gone. And the summary of the material in the final chapter, where he sums everything up, those have been deleted too. Somebody decided it was too dangerous. Now, one never knows. All the time they're finding, old Greek manuscripts that were overwritten, scraped and overwritten, and they can read them with modern technology. So I have hopes that someday, somebody's going to be doodling along, scanning through old parchment and say, hold it, Hippolytus, book 1, woohoo, we got it. But one of the things that's very interesting about the ritual as I was able to reconstruct it, which is an attempt to reconstruct the ritual as it was practiced in the 1920s, I should say. What was being done in the 1700s, what was being done in the 700s, what was being done back further still. I don't have enough data yet to really do that. But when the people who say that, and this includes many Freemasons, by the way, that Freemasonry has the shell of a valid mystery system, they just don't know how to use it. They don't know what to do with it. If I'm right, those people are correct. They actually have the remnants of an old mystery initiation, but it's mostly being used as a decoration for a social club these days.
Yeah, you might have to fly and talk to some Andeans or Yazidi for the true one for this.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to take the form and figure out, okay, what filled it. It's as though we have this marvelous box, and there's this little opening that looks like a keyhole, but nobody has the key. Right. And so they parade around the box, and but quite possibly the box can be opened. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because for the audience, the Nassene 2nd century, the snake Gnostics too, they were very syncretic. You have these rituals where you got Jesus and Hermes and Attis and Aphrodite. I mean, they're just like throwing everything in the kitchen sink, but it's very structured, and you're going through these stargates, and it is wild. But they themselves said gnosis is a cup, right? From the very get-go.
Yeah, they include that's in the Naassenes document that Hippolytus gives. They talk about gnosis as a cup, and then you have in one of the treatises of the Corpus Hermeticum, you have Hermes Trismegistus talking about here is the crater, the drinking cup of wisdom. Years ago, the Cathars, a husband and wife team of scholars, pointed out that this suggests very strongly that there's a Hermetic background to the Grail legend, and I think they're quite right.
Oh, yeah.
We know from the Nag Hammadi finds that the Gnostics read Hermetic literature.
Oh, yeah.
They were very familiar with it. So, you have this, it's very much like the sort of scene we have now, where, different, whether it's the Golden Dawnies and the Martinists and all the different groups of occultists, they're actually all talking to each other. And they're reading each other's books and so on. The Rosicrucians are over here, and the Templars are over there. Or in this case, the Naassenes are here, and the Johannitites are here, and the Hermetists are here, and you've got
ancient Alexandria, they were just rubbing shoulders. Look out the window. Hey, it's a Hermeticist. Hey, it's a Christian Gnostic.
Hey, yeah, they're all going to the same lectures. They're hanging out at the same wine
Let's
bars.
go hang out with Plotinus.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, for a time machine.
Oh, yeah. Woo.
And a better knowledge of Greek than I've got.
And a fun library, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to make sure the audience gets it. So that the Naassenes Gnostics, and of course, people have said that, yes, the Gnostics were always these smugglers. I mean, like Margaret Barker said, they were smuggling stuff from the days of Ashira, when Israel was more animistic and experiential shamanism, and they were just smuggling the stuff throughout history, the Greco-Roman times, smuggled it through the Manichaeans, Bogomils, and Cathars, and it just keeps getting smuggled.
That's what you do. That happens now. I mean, bootleg copies of old occult texts they're spread from occultist to occultist right now, and sometimes we can even get them published and get some royalties from that. I mean, that's part of what I do. And so, yeah, it's this constant looking around and saying, okay, what can we do with it? Where are some interesting teachings? Where are some practices we can use? And yeah, so this stuff continues to, the spice must flow.
It always does.
It always does. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can't suppress the stuff. But now for the audience who's still thinking in linear terms in one level, here comes the little twist that, yes, we have the Grail is the ultimate gnosis, the experience of the divine, the inner revelation, the connection with the all, the animus, we're all one, all that, whatever mysteries that we can't really describe. But it's not just that, right, John? We're also talking about a technology. In other words, as you write, the church wasn't just worried about the theology that this stuff had, but they were worried about the technology too. Well,
the thing you have to remember is, for example, the temple. There were various levels of technology in effect. I mean, what is ritual but a technology? It's a technology of the transformation of consciousness. But the great problem that has been faced by people who've been trying to preserve some of these technologies in during the last 2,000 years is that you have these literal-minded people who end up in charge of churches who are convinced that if it's framed in religious terms, it must be a religious thing, and therefore, if it's the wrong religion, you should burn it. And preferably the people who are involved in it you should burn those too. So they did. Now, the interesting thing is that the temple technology, the specific one I talked about earlier, that enhances agricultural fertility, that was actually picked up by monastic orders and spread through medieval Europe. You have a lot of medieval churches that are made according to the necessary things to make the temple technology work. And so you have, and in fact, you have plenty of signs of a period between about 1200 and about 1500, where large parts of Europe that you can't farm today were thriving. You go to England these days, in some of the northern and western parts of England, you will find areas that have not had anybody living in them for 400 years.
Wow.
And there are these ruined churches and villages. And if you look back in the medieval records, this was a thriving little town, and there were fields, and there were livestock, and 100 people living here. And Now you can't grow anything there. Something happened. That was one of the things I talked about in the in my book, The Secret of the Temple. And so my hypothesis that what happened was that this temple technology was brought back from the Holy Land by the Templars. They spread it through their various, because the Templars owned a lot of real estate in Western Europe during their heyday. They donated chunks of land, and they would, of course, use the land. They'd have their own farmers and their own superintendents and so on who would manage it, because that was how they raised money to pay for all that castle building in the Holy Land. So you'd have all of these farms that were setting up little Templar churches using the temple technology, and when the Templars were broken up after 1314, a lot of Templar members, ordinary rank and file Templars, were allowed to join other monasteries. They weren't all burned at the stake. There were hundreds of them who were, but in a lot of countries, they weren't all just rounded up and burned. They joined the Benedictines, or they joined the Cistercians. They joined one of the other monastic groups, and they took that with them. And so you have in the 1300s and the 1400s, you have this explosion of agricultural productivity in Europe. You have this, which drove the Renaissance came out of that, of great cultural flowering, because you had plenty of food, you had plenty of resources, and then things got difficult. Of course, there was the Black Death, little problems like that. You had the Reformation, and across all of the Protestant countries, you get rid of the monasteries and sell off the property and burn the libraries. And in the Catholic countries, you have the Council of Trent. You have, we must be absolutely orthodox, and anything that doesn't follow the absolutely narrowest definition of church policy must be abolished. And so that was the end of the temple technology in Europe, because whether you're in the Protestant world or in the Catholic world, it was no longer possible to practice it. And so there were various groups, including the earliest Freemasons, who tried to preserve the technology, but they were unsuccessful. And so here we are.
Here we are. Yeah, and of course I brought up Shira, and she's associated with the groves. You write about the groves of Demeter and others. So this technology was associated with the groves, and it was something to keep the land healthy. And it's interesting because, as we read in the Hebrew Bible, some people tried to destroy the Asherah technology.
Oh yeah. No, you had this constant problem with people who were literalists and who could not see that. I mean, in a non-scientific society, how were you going to talk about something like the temple technology? You have these things. You build a stone structure this way, or a wooden structure. You can do it either way. You build it according to certain kinds of patterns of sacred geometry. You do certain things in it, and the crops flourish. If you're in a non-scientific society, this is obviously a religious process. The gods are happy because you do this. And so, but unfortunately, then when you get an intolerant religion that says your gods are evil and wrong, and we must slaughter you and burn your temple, and hold it, what happened to the agricultural productivity? Well, it's okay, it must be God's will. And so a lot of stuff got lost that way. And the groves, actually, because it wasn't just the narrowly defined technology. The fact is that people in ancient times knew that if you plant groves of trees in certain places, it stops soil erosion. Again, we think of that as a simple, practical, scientific thing. In a non-scientific society, they're going to look at that and say, oh, there's a tree goddess who has to be kept happy, or she will make us starve. Right. Okay, no problem. So you get wise priests and priestesses who can figure out, okay, if we put a grove here, then Asherah will be happy. Okay, let's put a grove there. And the grove goes there, soil erosion stops, clearly Asherah is happy. And so you can, or Demeter, or whoever the local fertility goddess happens to be. It's all very straightforward, and it ties into religious and spiritual experience too. It's not that it was just a way of keeping the soil erosion from happening, but it had that dimension. And so and it was syncretist groups like the Naassenes who could see past the intolerance, see past the, well, they worship the wrong God, and they should worship the right God, and they should burn their groves and starve to death because that's holy. The Naassenes could see past that. The Naassenes could say, okay, these people understand the divine in this way, and that's fine, because of course, from a Gnostic standpoint, the divine is beyond human comprehension anyway. So all we have are symbols.
Yeah, so this is why this technology hidden or in the Grail stories means it tells us why there's so much ecological damage in these stories of the Grail. It's like something's going to go wrong if you don't do this.
If you don't do this, something's going to go wrong. One of the other things that I discovered while I was doing the research is that, there are several. Recently, scholars have found that there are some folk tales, some legends that actually seem to date back all the way to the early Bronze Age, back to 2000 BC. There are accounts of the building of Stonehenge that sound suspiciously like a dim memory of what actually happened. The stones are not being raised by magic; they're being raised by machines. Okay?
Wow!
Or you have one that I found out just fairly recently. There are legends from the islands north and west of Scotland that describe the coastline as it was before the oceans rose at the end of the last ice age, and they get the details right.
Wow!
So people are telling stories, knowing that 10,000 years ago this coastline was shaped differently. So clearly there's stuff being passed on for a very long time. And so you can look back and see, okay, when was the last time that England, let's say, went through that kind of total subsistence collapse where they damaged the ecosystem? Well, it actually was right around the early Bronze Age. There was basically a dark age. And so that's one of the things that feeds into the Grail legend. In particular, the elucidation, one of the strangest of the Grail legends, seems to be talking about the end of the early Bronze Age civilization that built Stonehenge as we know it, that raised the big sarsen stones and the trilithons, and the collapse of that into a dark age caused by subsistence crisis and starvation because they messed over the agriculture. And that you have this dim folk memory going back a very long ways.
Yeah, John, have you ever, I don't know if you ever, well, when we had our last interview, I still have that image of you throwing out your TV in 1980 or around that time. It's like, I don't need it. My life's much better now. And I'm sure it, but I don't know if we ever seen John Borman's Excalibur, 1981.
No, I didn't see that. However, I know a lot of people are into it.
Yeah, and it's amazing because most people don't know it had the cast included Ellen Mirren, Liam Neeson, Patrick Stewart, Ciarán Hinds, Gabriel Byrne. It was just full of these actors that would become very famous. But as a kid watching it, 13, and there was this scene where Arthur is sick and they have to get the Holy Grail, and for some reason, I was Catholic, and of course, the land is dying because Arthur is sick. And I'm like, that makes no sense at all. And then they bring him the Grail. He drinks from the Grail, and he walks out in his horse, and suddenly the land is alive and healthy. So John Borman knew this thing because the king was the land.
And that's something you find in a lot of the old Celtic traditions, where the idea is that the king is the focal point for the energies of the land. The king is married to the land, and has this complicated relationship. And his, to the extent that if he is sick, if he is weak, if he is mutilated in battle or something like that, he is no longer the king, and you have to get somebody who's strong and healthy again. So yeah, they're the complicated stuff.
Well, this has been a great chat. For the audience, please get The Ceremony of the Grail, and this can be found in all places. Maybe you can mention your website or blog. I'll have it in the show notes, but for those listening in audio.
Yeah, you can always go to www.ecosophia.net, SOPHIA.net, or Ecosophia, ecosophia.dreamwidth.org. I also have a Dreamwidth journal. If you like shopping on Bookshop, JMG at bookshop.com is my online book presence. So you can get it.
Awesome. Well, I highly recommend it because we just scratched the surface and there's a lot more wonderful gnosis in this book for your own gnosis. Well, John, as always, it is truly an honor and a pleasure and a lot of fun to having you on Aeon Byte. Thank you.
Thank you. I always enjoy being on.
Thank you. And there you have it, you shining crazy diamonds. John is the Gnosis bomb, as always. In our second part, we'll get deeper into King Arthur, including what's up with Mordred and the real identity of Merlin. John will talk about magic relics and astrology. He'll blow you away with the truth behind the myth of Hiram Abiff, and blow you away as he gives us some details on the Gnostic Grail ritual at the end of his book. And we'll finish with John giving us some political predictions, and the news is not good. So please become a member for the full Grail quest. It's only $6.99 a month for AB Prime, or $4.99 at Red Circle, or whatever you want to pledge on Patreon. You'll get access to my private Facebook group and Discord channel for AB Prime members and higher level Patreons. If you find value in this content, please help grow this Red Pill cafeteria. Your help can be in the form of some shekel donations on Stripe or the US mail. There is also a link on the show notes if you want to leave a tip, or you can tip on any YouTube show. There's always the merch store and wish list. And consider the Finding Hermes program, where we have exclusive meetings and presentations every month, with many past guests hanging out there for high-octane gnosis. If you need any help with these choices, just message my ass. I'm always here to help, and I truly appreciate your help. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real. Hello and goodbye, as always.